The life that you're building almost just fits, but never quite feels like it's yours. On the surface, it looks like a strength. And the really tricky part is that it feels the exact same from the inside. I genuinely thought that I was being emotionally mature. Fine is not the same as good. Fine is not the same thing as aligned. Fine is just survivable. You cannot make a clear decision through a filter. Hi, welcome back. Or if you're new here, hi. I'm so glad that you found this episode specifically because I think it's going to hit in a way that maybe you aren't expecting. Today, I want to talk about something that I see come up with my clients a lot, and it's something that's genuinely really tricky to name because on the surface, it looks like a strength. It presents as a strength. It gets reinforced as a strength, and in a lot of ways, it is a strength. And because of that, it tends to fly under the radar. And it is one of the patterns that I'm seeing is going unnoticed that are taking my clients out of their aligned path. And what I'm talking about is the tendency to find the silver lining, to be someone who doesn't catastrophize, to be someone who can look at a hard thing and locate the lesson in it, the growth in it, the reason that it's probably fine if you look at it at the right angle. The women who come to me with this, they are genuinely proud of this silver lining thinking, their ability to find the growth in it, find the lesson in it. And I get it because it usually did take work to get there. A lot of these women have spent years being someone who did spiral, who did catastrophize, who couldn't find the bright side of things. Maybe they've worked so hard to overcome some negativity patterns and they worked on themselves and they came out on the other side as someone who could do this, as someone who now has the skill set to be optimistic, see the positive side of things. And that felt like proof that the work that they've done was working. And I'm not here to take that away from you, away from them. And I genuinely mean that. I'm just here to bring some nuance into the conversation, to maybe plant seeds in perspectives that you haven't seen before, because I'm going to show you where this silver lining thinking pattern starts to cross the line from something that is healthy and efficient to maybe something that has some unhealthy tendencies. Because there is a version of this pattern that stops being a strength and starts being something else entirely. And the really tricky part is that it feels the exact same from the inside. That's why I want to bring the nuance to you. So that's what we're going to get into today. I want to start by actually naming what's real about this quality before I complicate it, because I think that matters. The ability to not catastrophize is genuinely really hard won for people. The ability to look at something really difficult and not immediately spiral into the worst case scenarios, to find what's still working, to stay oriented in the possibility, that does take a certain kind of emotional regulation. And for a lot of people, that ability comes after years of being the opposite, of being someone who couldn't hold a hard thing without it becoming like the whole world. So when I'm sitting with a client and she tells me, I'm just someone who finds the silver lining, I don't like to dwell, I've done enough work to let things like not take me down, I believe her. But I also start paying attention because in my experience, the women who identify most strongly with this silver lining thinking quality are often the ones who need to look at what it's doing under the surface. Not because the quality is wrong, but because it's been so useful for so long that it stopped feeling like a choice and started being automatic. And automatic is where it gets really complicated. If you are in any of my spaces, you know I say this a lot, that there is not one quality that is good or bad. I don't see traits, I don't see qualities as black or white. I don't see it as like this trait is a good trait to have and this trait is a bad trait to have. I think that all traits we need all of them. We need the full spectrum. It's just in balance. And that is what I think about the silver lining thinking pattern, is that it's a good trait to have. It's just that I'm starting to see when people start to over-identify with this silver lining thinking, with the optimism, and it starts to kind of tip the balance scale a little bit where they're relying on it a little too much and it turns into avoidance. So I'll probably say that 3 million times in this episode today, that I'm not trying to stake the claim that like this is a bad trait. I'm just trying to show the nuance of when it starts to tip the scale and how to bring it back into balance, and how to know when your silver lining starts to go into avoidance, which we will get into all of that. So here's what I see happen constantly. Someone will come to me and she is genuinely so self-aware. She has done the work. She is not someone who buries things. She knows herself pretty well. And yet there is this pattern where every time something comes up that is uncomfortable or just doesn't feel right, her mind almost immediately produces a reason why it's actually okay, why it's not as bad as it looks, why if she just shifts her perspective slightly, she can see the good in it. And she does this so quickly, so automatically, that she doesn't even realize that she's doing it. It almost just feels like, she's good at processing things. That's how it appears to her. Like, oh, I'm just not going to let it get to me, right? It's just, it feels internally to her like, oh, I've just done so much work that, I just see the good in things now. But what's actually happening is that she's not processing the thing. She's actually bypassing it. And there's a really important difference between the two things, between processing and bypassing. Processing means that you actually let the information land and you feel what it brings up and you let yourself know what you know. Bypassing means you found a way around the discomfort fast enough that you never actually have to sit with what it was telling you. And I know this one personally because I had a version of this that kept telling me in career situations, in relationship dynamics, and it kept me in these dynamics way longer than I should have been. Every red flag had a silver lining. Every moment of discomfort had like a reframe or like a positive spin. And I genuinely thought that I was being emotionally mature. And it took me a while to see it for myself. It took me a while to actually see that I was just getting really good at not letting myself finish a thought that was going to be uncomfortable to finish. And I'm not sure if you'll relate to this, but where it was coming from for me is I got in the like toxic positivity cycle where gosh, it was probably so early on in my journey. I remember everything was about positivity. Like, don't have negative thoughts, think positively. If you can put positive energy into the universe, you'll receive positive energy. Just be grateful, right? These were all things that were cycling. They might still be cycling now. I think I've tuned off to those kind of conversations because I see the nuance now and I see how the toxic positivity really becomes detrimental. But that's where it was coming for me. I felt like oh gosh, this is like bringing up so much for me. I felt like if I addressed any of the negativity, then it would mean that, I don't know, negative things were going to come in my way, or I was going to manifest like negativity in my life, or I was going to make it come true, because your thoughts create your reality, or so they say, right? And so for me, I thought that that was the work. I thought that the work was like, just be grateful for what it is. Like, let go of the things that don't serve you. And it took me being in a relationship that was not good for way too long for me to wake up to this, to realize that, I was actually bypassing all of the things that I was feeling. And I will be honest, I was a little angry at the personal development space for it, because I felt like I've been doing all of this positive thinking. I've been being optimistic. Why is this happening to me? And that was the wake-up call that really made me dive into the nuance of optimism and positivity and the silver lining thinking, because I was just so angry. I was like, how can you tell me that if I think positively for long enough, positive things will happen, when my world was crumbling around me and I was trying to think positive? I was just bypassing everything that was happening. I was letting things go that I should have been paying attention to. And I was silencing myself the entire time. I was silencing my intuition. I was silencing my needs. And I had to rebuild from there, because it really did tear me down. So, long-winded way of saying I get it. And that's why I can relate to my clients, and that's why I can pick out the nuance in this pattern. So when I see it in my clients, it's so clear to me because I've experienced it and I've watched it happen in real time, where for them I can see that like something comes up and I can see them register it, and then almost in the same breath they've already constructed why it's fine. And when I slow that down, when I ask them, just stay with that first part for a second before the reframe, what's underneath is almost always something that they've known for a long time, something that's been trying to get their attention. And the silver lining has been quietly, efficiently keeping them from having a look at it. That has a cost over time. It doesn't cost you anything dramatically. I think that's the thing, is that because it's like these little tiny moments, it's never one obvious moment that kind of like smacks you in the face. It's so much quieter than that. It's this slow accumulation of fine, right? It's these little tiny moments that feel off, but you're like, I'm sure it's fine. And then moments later, another moment that comes up that is trying to get your attention, and you're like, maybe I'm just, you know what? I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to think positively. I'm going to be optimistic. I'm just going to let it go. And it's those slow accumulations of, I'm sure it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I'm just going to let it go, that pile up. And when you think about it, like, fine is not the same as good. Fine is not the same thing as aligned. Fine is just like survivable, right? It's reframable, something you can construct a silver lining around if you try hard enough. And if you're really good at finding the silver linings, you can stay in fine for a very long time. And that's kind of when people come to see me, that they're like, I've just been fine for so long. I'm tired of just being fine. There has to be something more out there. And it's confusing to them because they're like, there's this duality, right? There's this optimism. I thought I was being optimistic. I thought I was being positive. Why do I just feel fine? Why hasn't it translated into me feeling better about myself, about my world, about my life? And it creates like a kind of like a confusion element to it. And what I watch it cost women is specifically this, the ability to make a clear decision, because you cannot make a clear decision through a filter. And that's what the silver lining thinking becomes when it's automatic. It becomes a filter. Every piece of information that comes in, every emotion that you feel, everything that you're reacting to comes in, and it gets quietly adjusted before you have a chance to actually see it, which means that the version of your life that you're making decisions from isn't really very accurate, right? Because it's being edited by you with the best of intentions, but still edited nonetheless. And I had a client once who, she had been in a business partnership that was making her miserable for over a year. And every time we would get close to the real conversation about, the business partnership, she would find the silver lining in it. Things like, my partner has really good qualities. The timing just isn't right for me to make a change. It's not really that bad. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. And it would, all of those thoughts individually seem fine, right? They seem okay. Yeah, those seem like sound thoughts. None of them were untrue. And that's why it's tricky, because technically they were all kind of true, but the accumulation of all of them, they were doing the job of keeping her from finishing the sentence that started with, this isn't working, and I've known that for a while. And when we finally slowed it down enough that she could actually hear that, and she got the courage to actually take a look at it and get vulnerable with that, what she had been saying to herself underneath all of those reframes and all of that optimism is that she had known for a long time that something didn't feel right. And the silver lining had just been a very efficient way of keeping her from having to do anything about it. In a way, it's avoidance. In a way, it's protection, right? But it's still costing her, because she didn't feel emotionally like it was okay. She was just kind of logically lying to herself, telling herself it was okay. But can you see how there was a detachment from herself? Can you see how her body was communicating something feels off, but she was silencing that, pushing that down, and her mind was coming on and saying, you know what? Maybe it's really not that bad. Maybe it's just me. That disconnection is important, and we're going to get to that. To circle back to what it costs you is that It's never one dramatic moment. And I think that we lie to ourselves and we just expect big things to happen and then we'll pay attention to them. But it's usually, most times in our life, it's usually that slow accumulation of really small things. And it ends up being like a quiet, steady distance from your own knowing, a life that keeps not quite fitting and you can't figure out why. Because every time you try to look at it clearly, you end up looking at the most generous version of it instead. Again, going back to the editing, going back to the filter. I want to go deeper into the aligned living connection piece of this. I think that this is the piece that kind of makes all of these little things click. When we talk about aligned living, and I talk about aligned living a lot in my content with my clients, that's kind of one of the pillars of my work. When I say aligned living, I don't mean some like Pinterest version of your life. I don't mean this like really polished aesthetic like version that looks good from the outside. When I say aligned living, I mean a life that is actually built from what is true for you. Your real desires, your real values, what you genuinely not what you've been told to want, not what you've tried to talk yourself into wanting, not what makes sense on paper, not what you find a silver lining for, what is actually true for you underneath all of that. And the thing about building an aligned life is that it requires a relationship with your inner world. Because your inner world is where all of that information lives. It's where your feelings live, your instincts, your intuition, your desires, your values, the quiet knowing that shows up before you're really ready to like do something. Your subconscious is constantly sending you signals, constantly. It's registering everything, what's working, what's not working, what needs attention, what needs to be healed, what's being asked to be looked at. It's doing all of this work, whether you're paying attention to it or not. And aligned living, real aligned living, requires that you're in conversation with that when a signal comes up, you let it land and you get curious about it and you ask, what is this actually trying to show me? What is this feeling trying to tell me about what I want or what I don't want or what needs to be looked at? That's how you stay in alignment. Not by having everything figured out, but by having a really good relationship with your internal world, staying in relationship with yourself, and by keeping that channel open. And the silver lining thinking pattern, when it's automatic, when it tips that scale of being a little bit unbalanced, it closes that channel between you and your inner world. Here's exactly how it happens. Something will show up, a feeling, a moment of discomfort, a situation that like doesn't feel quite right. And that is your inner world sending you a signal usually through your emotions, right? Or your physical sensations. That is your subconscious flagging something and saying, hey, look here. There's something here that needs your attention. And before that signal even fully lands, before you can ask, what is this showing me? The silver lining activates. It's fine. It's not that bad. What's the positive spin on this? What is this trying to teach me? How can I grow through this? Look at this other part. Focus on that instead. And the signal gets intercepted. It never finishes arriving. And so you never get to look at what that signal is actually pointing to. You never get to ask, what that signal needs, what needs to be healed here, what needs to be processed, what's coming up, what is this telling me about what I feel or what I want. The moment passes and it's filed under handled and you moved on. And if this happens once, it's really, not a big deal. But the problem is it doesn't just happen once when you have this automatic pattern. It happens over and over and over and over again. Every signal that gets intercepted is a moment of not looking inward. It's a moment of disconnection from yourself. It's a moment that you're not tending to your relationship with yourself, with your inner world. And over time, slowly, that adds up to like real disconnection from your own knowing, from your own desires, from the part of you that has been trying to get your attention this whole time. And it's really easy to see this happens in relationships with your partner, with friendships, right? If you are not communicating your needs, a disconnection. happens, right? There ends up being like a little bit of a wedge. If you're holding on to something and you're not communicating it, a wedge, right, starts to be put in place. So it's a little bit easier to see how this plays out with other dynamics, but it happens in our inner world. So it happens with ourselves. We get disconnected from our own knowings, from our own desires, from the whole part of us that's been trying to get, our attention the whole time. And then you wonder why it's hard to know what you want, why decisions feel murky, why you can do all of the mindset work and still feel like something is off, why the life that you're building almost just fits but never quite feels like it's yours. And it's because the foundation of aligned living, knowing yourself, hearing yourself, trusting what's true for you has been quietly being eroded, not because you were trying to do that, but because the filter has been running in the background and you didn't know it was there. And that is what the pattern is costing you, not just staying in things too long, not just making decisions through a slightly distorted lens, but slowly losing access to yourself, to your desires, to the signal, to the relationship that everything else, every aligned decision, every act of real self-trust, every version of life that actually fits is built on. And you can't find your way back to alignment without finding your way back to yourself. So I do want to give you a little exercise to help you with this, something to actually work on in your day-to-day. There is a question that cuts through this pattern faster than almost anything else, and it is this. When you find the silver lining, is that coming from a place of clarity, or does it just bring you relief? Because those are not the same thing, and they feel really different if you slow down enough to notice. Coming from clarity means that you actually see the situation more honestly than you did before. Even if it makes you uncomfortable, you know more than you did, and you arrived at this decision because you've honored yourself, you've checked in with yourself, you have kind of processed through it, you've landed on something that arriving at the silver lining feels like you're getting a little bit closer to yourself, giving you closer to what's actually true. Relief means that the discomfort got quiet enough that you stopped needing to look, and you don't know more. You just feel less urgency around the thing, and the relief can feel really similar to clarity in that moment. But the difference is that an hour later or a day later, that quiet hum is still there, because you didn't actually resolve anything. You just made it easier for you to live with it for a while. And relief is not nothing. Sometimes you genuinely need to find the silver lining to get through something hard without swallowing it. That's real, that's useful. But if the silver lining is consistently bringing you relief and not coming from a place of clarity, not coming from a place of connection with yourself, then that is the pattern running, and that is when it starts to tip over on the unresourceful side of the scale. And the question worth sitting with is, what am I so relieved to not have to look at? What signal is trying to reach me that I keep finding reasons not to receive? See how even just me saying those two questions, you start to you get a little twinge, right? You're like, oh God, I don't know if I want to go there, right? That's how you know that if you're too scared to go there, if it feels too big, if it feels too heavy, or if it feels too vulnerable, then there's probably something there that you have been avoiding. And the silver lining thinking, the optimism, the positivity has been a band-aid over that thing. It's kind of been allowing you to turn your head and not look at it. If you ask yourself those questions of, something happens and you find the optimism, and you ask yourself these questions of is there something here that I'm scared to look at? Is there something that's trying to reach me that I'm finding reasons not to receive? Tune in with your body. That's this whole process is getting it back into relationship with your body. If you're asking yourself those questions and you feel pretty neutral about it, you're like, you know what, nothing really is there, then that's an answer too. But the process is still the same. You're still asking the questions. You're still tuning in with yourself. You're still tuning in with your inner world, and then you're answering the question from there. And that right there, that whole process of turning the lens inward and checking in with yourself, that going back to the conversation that we had about the authentic living connection and that relationship with yourself, that is the moment. That is the moment that you reconnect with yourself and you strengthen your relationship with yourself, because you're tuning into your inner world. You're tuning into your desires, your emotions, what the signal is trying to tell you. And that right there, that is the key moment. That is the moment that connection reappears. That is the moment that self-trust can build. And that is the moment that you start to have a different relationship with your inner world. And you kind of say like, you know, my inner world is safe for me to enter, safe for me to see, safe for me to process. And that's kind of a necessary skill if you want to make sure you're living a life that does feel aligned with you. So you're not breaking this pattern to go back into like your negativity or to start catastrophizing. You're not doing this to assume the worst. Just let the thing finish its sentence, to stay long enough with what might be under the surface to hear what it's actually trying to say to you, because that signal, that feeling, that discomfort, that quiet knowing of something that's under the surface, it's not trying to make your life harder. It's trying to bring you back to yourself. So listen and let it. So if this landed for you, if you recognized yourself somewhere in this episode, I want you to sit with that recognition for a second rather than immediately reframing it or immediately moving on to the next tool or, you know, episode or thing to learn. I want you to sit with this, because if it's something that makes you uncomfortable, again, it's something to look at. There's information there. Something's trying to be communicating with you. And notice that impulse. Notice that impulse if it's there. If you're hearing this and you're feeling a desire to like run to do something else or move on extra quickly, or saying like, oh, that was nice, moving on. That might be the impulse that we're talking about, right? That might be the silver lining, that optimistic thinking that's, you know, hijacking that moment. So if you want to go deeper on the specific roots of this pattern, like why it actually forms, what particular fear or experience is underneath this specific version of this pattern, I did a full breakdown of that over on YouTube this week. I will link that in the show notes for you, because understanding the root is where the real work really starts. Awareness of the pattern is the beginning, but it's not the whole thing. If you know my work, you know that's what I'm all about. Awareness does not actually get you anything. You need to actually find the root causes of this. So in that video, I take a look at all of the different nuanced layers that could be living in the subconscious to help you understand if you do have this pattern, if you are noticing, okay, I think that I might be tipping the scale. I think I might be toxic positivitying myself into this situation, or, you know, I'm noticing that pattern. It all lives in the subconscious. So that video will go into the subconscious root causes to help you build a deeper layer of awareness, so you know what to work with, so you know what to tackle, what to reprogram, so that way you can dissolve it and you can bring yourself back into the balance. And last thing, one of the things that I always tell my clients is we want to bring ourselves back into choice, right? So when we overindulge in a certain quality, when we are like gripping onto a certain quality for whatever reason, we are no longer in choice. It just becomes automatic, right? We feel like we have to, otherwise something bad might happen. That's kind of what happens under the surface. We are no longer in choice. So when you can understand the root causes of this, you can work through that, you can reprogram those things, which is what my work is all about. You bring yourself back into choice, and now you have the choice of, do I want to see this optimistically, or do I want to vocalize a need? Do I feel like I need to honor myself in this moment instead? Do I have to do something about it, right? You now have the choice to look at it and think, what is the thing that will honor me most in this moment? But without that, you're no longer in choice, because you have it's just an automatic pattern that you go into the optimism, you go into the toxic positivity, and everything that we discussed in this episode today. You lose that connection with yourself and you can't make aligned decisions. So everything I do with my clients is bringing them back into choice, putting them in the driver's seat of their life by loosening the threads that are making them feel like they have to have this automatic pattern. So if this resonated with you, share it with someone who you think would relate. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Follow me on all of the things. I would love to hear your thoughts, and I will see you in next week's episode.